Hello, welcome back to Giving Empathy. It's a podcast about talking to people about stuff they're interested in. I'm Scott Mercer. I'm the guy who talks to you and also other people. For the first time this week, I have a pair of guests, my cousins Jeff and Jono Hansen. They live in Perth, so I don't see them very often at all. Jeff and Jono have a drum and bass project they do together called Ekko Sidetrack. And recently, while they were on tour, they came to Brisbane to play a show at the Bright Side, so I was lucky enough to catch up with them then. This was actually the second podcast I recorded. It's just taken a long time to edit together because editing 3 people is a lot more difficult than editing only 2 people, and it was also quite a long conversation. And we don't really talk that much about everyday habits in this episode. The 2 main things we talk about are making music and movies. It definitely gets pretty nerdy, and so don't expect any life-changing revelations in this episode. But if you like hearing people get nerdy about the technical aspects of making electronic music and the cinema work of Al Pacino, then stick around. I guess I should give a few spoiler warnings for this one. So in the second half, when we talk about movies, we give away some plot points from the movies Scarface, that's the Brian De Palma version, The Godfather, and Alien 3. All of which are pretty old movies by now, but if you really don't want them spoiled, consider yourself warned for the second half of the podcast. Just so you know which one's which, Jeff is the first one to start answering my first question, and then Jono is the one who cuts in. All right, here we go. This is what it sounds like when I interrogate my cousins immediately after they get off a 5-hour flight from Perth. Enjoy!
Let's do this.
So I'm here with Jeff and Jono Hansen, aka Ekko Sidetrack. The first question I want to ask all my guests is, how do you know me? What is our relationship?
Scott found us at the airport.
He looked nice, so we said, yes, we'll get a lift.
And he has not let us out of his house.
It's been 3 months.
Help us. We're cousins.
We are.
Related via our mothers, who are sisters.
Yes.
And it seems like we only see each other like every 5 years or so.
Yeah.
But whenever we do, we have a really good time.
Yeah.
I think.
I swear, last time we saw each other was Miranda's wedding.
My sister's wedding, yes.
And I swear we said, during the night, we're like, we should do this more often. When we were drunk, and we're like, this is for we're having a fun time. We should do it more often.
I think because Brisbane is the furthest from Perth, it doesn't make it easy. And this is the first time we've been to Brisbane to play. And so it's worked out really well that we could have the extra day here. But it's I think getting to Perth or getting from Perth to anywhere else, or you coming over and stuff like that, it's there has to be a family melding. You were there for Christmas, and then we did Miranda's wedding, and that was quite close to each other.
Mm.
And then it's radio silence. Nothing. Everyone's busy, I suppose.
So you're in town to play. So Ekko Sidetrack is the musical project that you have together.
Yes.
Now, this is really interesting to me that there's that your brothers and your creative project is with one another. When did you first start Ekko Sidetrack?
It was the European summer of 2008.
Yes, so mid-year 2008.
And we were, because we'd been in bands and stuff before, and I think probably 6 months earlier, your friend had given you Ableton, a music producing program, and we were in Europe and driving through Norway with our mum and dad and older brother, and
I had
screwing around in Ableton.
Ableton on my laptop and was just making sounds with it and stuff. And when we got to the hotel later on, I'd be like, I want to work on this. I didn't want to play games or anything on the computer. I just wanted to work on music. We started prior to this, we kind of DJ'd together because...
Had we been DJing together before we started producing together?
Well, I bought turntables in 2000 and I want to say 2007, the end of 2007. I think because I'd finished my degree and then I was going back to do honours, but I'd saved up and I was going to buy turntables and a mixer, and then I'd started buying records. And then Jono started buying records. And for there was a short period where it was like, my records, his records, don't touch my records, blah, blah, blah. And then we realized that we should just the same genre of music. I want to play those songs.
But I swear there was a time when I wasn't allowed to use your decks.
Oh yeah, because they were my pride and joy. I've just invested, I don't know, $2,000 in this stuff. And it's like, don't touch that stuff.
But I think that was before. I feel like you got into it first and then I couldn't touch your stuff. And then I probably mixed on someone else's and then was like, oh no, I kind of know what's going on. Or do you think your decks were the first thing that I mixed on?
No, maybe it happened more like that. But the whole, if we wind it back even further to make this question slightly more long-winded, it's like band practice became a chore, as you probably know. Okay, guys, we're Tuesday and Thursday nights. You can't do Tuesday? Okay, let's do Wednesday and Thursday night. He can't do fuck this. I'm going to start making music by myself. And whenever people turn up to do band practice, we'll do band practice. And then that got just phased out.
So this is really a convenient thing. You finally found the person who, and you would have been still living in the family home at the time.
Yep.
So you found someone who didn't have to go anywhere for band practice because you weren't playing instruments and he lived in the same house as you.
Yeah.
That's ingenious.
Yeah. And I mean that same convenience has also hindered us when we were living together, being creative in such a small space and being brothers and living together and spending so much time together was quite a lot, I think.
Yeah, but at the start, I think if it was the catalyst to make the whole thing start, you're right. I've never thought about it like that. I've always gone make music by yourself, you make music with your brother, but it's almost like I'd be making something and you'd come in and be like, oh, I should do this. And I'd be like, yeah, cool, I should do that. And then it just naturally grew and grew and grew. And then.
So back to the hotel in Norway. So Jeff, you'd be in the car all day, you'd come up with something. So then what happened?
Probably just sat down at the computer and was literally using Ableton for the first time, not even knowing what EQ was, and being like, just put this sound in, put a piano in there. Oh man, what, this sound, what does that do? And then we making a song because we had the concept of songwriting and we knew what songs we liked and we had an interest in drum and bass already. And then it was like, oh, now I'm using a computer to make this rather than a guitar and stuff like that.
I'm going to go back even further because we were making songs in GarageBand on your Tower Mac.
On my G4, yeah.
Very early, screwing around with drum and bass because you were doing the rap stuff with John, your joke raps and stuff.
Making shitty loop-based songs. Anyone that when GarageBand first came out, it was on my mate's house. He had 4 Macs because all the kids had Macs. And so we'd just go upstairs and everyone would get it in a different room and we'd just make stupid songs and rap on them when we were drunk or just do whatever. But when everyone else went downstairs, I'd always stay another 20 minutes upstairs and be like, oh, you can change the notes around? Oh, I'm going to use this drum beat here, and then just thought a bit more in that producerly way, and it just felt natural.
I remember when I was at school, I had a friend who he was the only friend of mine who had a Mac, and it had this program open. We'd play around with it. It was the song Frontier Psychiatrist by the Avalanches.
Yeah.
But it was chopped up, and we just put different bits of it in different order and just repeat bits record over and over again, and just make it sound like a crazy kind of Looney Tunes thing.
Well, that concept of sampling basically, and that you've discovered it organically, oh, I'm using the computer as this tool to grab things here. I remember I made an intro for one of my friend's 18th
was that
birthdays.
the Justice The Justice thing?
No, there was another thing I used. I grabbed someone else's intro and then like put like spoken word stuff over it, and I did that in GarageBand. And then when someone showed me Ableton, I was like, oh, this is like more pro. Like, oh, I'm not bound by these things. And I think when I first opened Ableton, I was probably like, so where are the loops? Where are the like pre-made? Oh, there's none here. What's this is going to be hard. But yeah, I don't know. It's weird to think about how it all started, like that seed of the concept.
It was very organic. The whole thing was very...
like an unwashed potato.
Yeah. Like just it seemed like we were just taking logical steps with no real end game. Like I can't remember really thinking, even in Europe or when we got back, like I want to be a DJ one day.
It doesn't sound like, one of you was like, hey, I'm doing this project. Do you want to be a part of it? You were just screwing around with it.
It's kind of just happening, like in around the house. Like, oh, I'm making some song. Or we'd be mixing in the other room, like DJing. And then I remember I borrowed my mate's, this would have been probably 12 months after getting Ableton, I borrowed my mate's CDJs because previous to that we just had vinyl. And the CDJs meant we could play the songs that we made on the computer. And we're like, all right, cool. And this is where now we're set.
Yeah.
Like, you play it and you're like, it kind of doesn't sound as good as the other ones, but I'm sure that's just like a mastering thing. No, it's actually knowing what the fuck you're doing thing. And so over the last 8-9 years, we've learned everything to go into that.
In the drum and bass scene, the producers making music, is it mostly solo people or are there many duos or groups?
It's both. I mean, we know off the top of my head 2 groups that are brothers as well. Probably the majority solo. I'd say like 60%, 70%
maybe
solo.
More. It's like the producer life is of sitting there. If you're like the classic bedroom producer, it could be a pretty lonely kind of concept.
I've recently been catching up on your podcast that you do, The Adventures of Ekko and Sidetrack, available on iTunes, I guess. Is it on iTunes?
It is.
Right.
Good plug.
And one of the things that you guys mentioned was that like one of you can be working on something like all day while the other's at real work. And then the other one comes in and is like, oh no, it needs to be this. And that strikes me as would be such an advantage to have someone who's so close to you in experience and outlook that they could essentially be an extension of your own creative part of your brain.
Sometimes it's an extension. Sometimes it's you wish it was more of an extension because like we're pretty good at thinking like where the other one's going. And it works really well in that we can like literally do like almost like a shift. Like you go in there and do that and then like, oh, I'll just pick up then. Yeah, killing it. But then there's some moments it's like you're deviating off the path that I had in my head and you don't even know that path because I've never described it to you and only I can hear it. And
I think sometimes we have an almost telepathic relationship and it annoys us when it's not like that. Because I
can hear what he's thinking. No.
I'm sending you my thought.
You're saying it wrong.
Because we spend so much time together and we are creative together so much that usually we're agreeing and usually we're on the same
page.
I was going to say plate. And I was like, that doesn't make sense.
We finish each other's
sentence. Sandwiches. So when we're not, and we kind of realize that we are 2 very different people.
It's like in Multiplicity, Michael Keaton movie. Doesn't get referenced enough these days, I don't think. But like he's got his immediate clone who's like exactly the same as him and just like does all the housework and he's great and knows exactly what needs to be done. But then like they keep cloning from the previous clone. So it's like a photocopy of a photocopy by the time. And like the 4th one is like a dribbling idiot.
Yeah.
And so I guess some days is it like it's just a clone of you and other days it's like, what's this fuckwit doing?
Yeah, totally. And sometimes as well, like we've had arguments where at the end of the argument you go like, we definitely agree, but we're just saying it in a different way. And then like one of us just has a really articulate moment and then the other one goes, yeah, Yeah, that's what I suppose that's what I was trying to say. Like, oh my God.
A lack of articulation is
when you think the other person is telepathic with you, communication skills can really drop to shit.
Right, because you assume they know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and you
can
talk in these kind of shit, broken sentences and use descriptive words that other people wouldn't be able to understand, but yeah, you assume that they know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I guess I should point out you're not twins. You're, what, 3 years apart?
4 years apart.
4 years apart, right.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask some really ignorant shit now about electronic music because I want to know when you play live on stage, like, what are you doing?
Usually just laughing with each other.
Yeah.
Having fun.
Because like, how much of you do is playing live music? How much is like a track you brought in?
So from a DJ's perspective, a DJ essentially mixes two tunes that are already finished and produced. So if I can grab one by this producer and one by that producer, and then I'm working out a creative way to mix the tunes. Because they're at either the same or very similar BPMs, I'm using the turntable pitch control to match those BPMs. So get the kicks in line, the snares in line, and then using EQ on the mixer to mix those two tunes to hopefully form a new, something that's cool sonically. Some people just mash tunes together, but it's the best mixes are like, in key, and they kind of dance in and out of each other.
Like, so you might use the vocals from one song over the top of another song that's in the same key that doesn't have vocals. So suddenly you're kind of creating a new version of both those songs.
And then you can take that to the next level with like more kinds of stuff, like get 3 tunes in there, or like bring in tunes quickly, or it doesn't happen so much in drum and bass because it's quite fast, like 175 BPM. So, but like house guys like set loop points, and they might like do looping stuff and create new arrangements with certain things. But if you're seeing a DJ, mostly he's just mixing multiple tunes together. And then if you're seeing someone like Flume do some of his live show, he's probably like using triggers and stuff. So he's got like an Ableton set running in the background, so like certain tracks and like scenes, like things are meant to happen at certain points. But then he's got like, his 6 little pads might represent like triggering a vocal or triggering a certain section that he can control, and he probably has like the ability to on a keyboard change things as well. And then there's guys that go full live, like getting a band or something to do, and you can go as deep as you want. Like there's stories of guys using crazy amounts of hardware to have like backups of backups, and they're triggering everything live. Like, so they're basically playing stuff. The drummer is triggering all their samples, like all this kind of stuff. But there's a line where like people don't care, because you can't go to the crowd like, this is really, really fucking hard, and actually the technical work that goes into playing this song.
Let me spend 15 minutes explaining the technicalities of this live rig.
Yeah, so there's like levels, but really we produce music, which we do in the studio, and then when you see us DJ, we're just mixing tunes.
It must be hard to really have people appreciate that, because when you're behind a screen, like, people can't see what you're doing. And it's really amazing that they haven't come up with a way of visually representing that you're doing shit. Because like you can watch a guitarist play a guitar, and that's where the noise is coming from. But like, why don't people like project their screens out to the crowd or something so you can appreciate what they're doing with the EQ and all that?
I think there's an element of DJing where people don't know what the fuck you're doing, and it's almost somewhat more impressive. Or there's a line between, I kind of know what's happening, but I don't know how he's doing it. And that's really cool, and appreciating the art form. And then there's people that think they're just pressing buttons. It's a waste of time. There's no skill in it at all.
I also reckon that like if the gear looks technical, then there's like an element of mystique to it. Like if you look at a guitar, someone playing a guitar, and like some punk could be like, oh, I could play that guitar. And then you show them like a mixer with a CDJ. I know it's basic. I know there's like 4 buttons on there you have to worry about, but someone looks at it and is like, whoa, there's so many buttons.
Flashing lights. It's like an old computer display from Star Wars or something.
But if I told you that does this, that's a fader, that's an EQ, you'd be like, huh, this is really simple. Yes, it is.
At what point and why did you decide to start a podcast in addition to your drum and bass project?
Because we're idiots and we really love being overworked.
Because we like listening to podcasts and we also like having conversations. And we kind of found ourselves being in situations where we were having interesting conversations a lot of the time. And because we are in the position we are in Perth, we kind of had access or have access to interesting people and art, like even just drum and bass, like interesting people in the drum and bass scene, artists coming in and having conversations with them, which you get information out of it that you don't get in a interview or like a normal radio interview, like what we were talking about before. It's usually set questions, 5 minutes. You don't get that in freeform conversation.
I do really love how technical it gets on the Adventures of Ekko and Sidetrack, because like I don't know specifically what you're talking about, but like you and your guests clearly have so much passion and expertise in that area. Like it's fun to listen to anyway. Like I really liked when you were talking about how genre changes based on BPM alone.
Yeah,
that was a really funny conversation.
But it's like I've had a friend say you should intercut like bits of songs or sounds that you're talking about. If you're talking with a producer, you should be like, and they talk about like a saw wave synth or something, you should like cut it in. And I'm like, that's an interesting point. Like, I think if we did one that was quite technical and we had the time to do the production on it, I think it'd be cool to do. So, or give people an example of certain sounds, because you get caught up in the moment, especially if you're talking with someone that has a knowledge of it. You're just like, talking about something. And then you go back and listen to it and you go, I don't think people are going to know what this 5-minute block is about. But I suppose that's the niche thing of podcasts.
Yeah, exactly. Like someone is going to know and someone is going to appreciate it all the more that you're going into that detail.
Yeah.
And I think like we try not to go into such detail for long periods of time. Like I can remember in maybe the podcast with Tony, we talked about some technical stuff, but tried to kind of do it as quickly as possible because we do know it's kind of boring.
If it's interesting podcast stuff, it will continue going along, but if it gets bogged down in the nitty gritty, then that conversation will kind of stop naturally, like kind of grind to a halt, and you'll be like, all right, we need to talk about more interesting things, or just turn off the mics and then go into the studio and gush over some EQ like idiots.
I noticed, I saw on social media, you're starting up your own events as well, Adventures with Ekko and Sidetrack.
Yep.
So is this tell me about that. Is this like a line of things you want to do, or just like one?
It's a global brand. Coca-Cola's getting behind us. No, we're starting a night. So like there hasn't been a drum and bass night in Perth, a regular one, for a while, and we thought let's do something where we bring out people that we like to play with and like upcoming producers and DJs in Perth, and I don't know, kind of just have a party, I suppose. We and erred about what to call it, to the point where we had different designs. Like I had done different artwork for it, and then we're just like, no, I think it was Jono's girlfriend that was like, don't call it that. And then that was the day before we were meant to be showing it to the club. And then we ended up just going like Adventures kind of.
I think Adventures was an original idea that we had.
Because of the podcast name.
Well, yeah, because of the podcast name and also the whole like adventures through music and the whimsical nature of us and, come on an adventure with us, that kind of thing.
It's an inclusive kind of thing. Adventures, yeah. It's like you're part of the adventure. It's like Magical Mystery Tour.
Yeah.
You're not just watching a movie of a bunch of Beatles on drugs. You're part of the adventure.
And I think that's what we wanted, but we didn't want it to be super fun or like come across a bit lame. And that kind of doesn't work in the electronic music world.
It does seem like a serious kind of genre with serious names for things.
Yeah, it is very serious, and I think it does need to be more fun. It's a very fine line between serious and fun, and then just stupid and silly, and not being taken seriously. So you want it to be fun, but to be taken seriously.
Yeah, it's like a DJ name that you call yourself, like
Thunderstack.
DJ Thunderstack, which is a funny thing when you're just like up and coming, and then all of a sudden someone wants to book you for a gig, a good one, and then you see Thunderstack written on the lineup underneath all these other guys, and you're like, oh man, that's kind of like, it was funny, now it's just lost all its humor.
Like Chet Faker changed his name to his real name recently.
Yeah,
I like Chet Faker as a name.
I guess it's a play on Chet Baker, right?
Yeah.
Who's Chet Baker?
Blues guy?
Yeah, or was it Chip Baker? Chet Baker or Chip Baker?
Chet Baker.
One of them. But yeah, but it's funny, he only changed it after what was arguably going to be his most success.
Yeah.
Like he's never going to... He took out the Triple J Hottest 100, didn't he? 1 year?
He definitely came close. The song with Flume did really well, and his own original stuff as well. It's maybe that's part of the whole kind of imposter syndrome. It's like to do something as a pseudonym is to do something almost as a character, because if you put your own name on it, then it's like, this is a Jeff Hansen song, fuck. But if I call myself a Thunderstack, then it's a character doing the thing, and I've got this like alter ego that has certain things that I might not do, but they do.
You're separated from it. It's
a little
not
bit.
So personally. So if someone doesn't like it, it's not like a personal attack on Jeff Hansen.
Is there an element of that being Ekko and Sidetrack?
Sometimes I wake up in the morning and don't know whether I'm going to be Sidetrack or whether I'm going to be Jono.
It depends what kind of shirt you put on. Maybe. I think we've kind of got, like, we are who we are, and that's a very profound statement. But like we couldn't pull off a uber serious, fashion forward, cutting edge electronic music producer look, because that's not us. So what you see is what you get. It's like the truth is that we are kind of dorks, and that, you know, we've been making our own movies and stupid stuff forever, but now through drum and bass and music, we're like, oh, we made something ridiculous and we're just going to share it with people now.
It's funny how that kind of, not that we resisted being ourselves at all, but we've looked down other avenues of marketing and that kind of thing where the answer was really laying in front of us the whole time.
Yeah, well, even with the video for the launch of Adventures with Ekko and Sidetrack, is like Jono came up with the idea that we should go to the beach and recreate Inception, basically that first scene in Inception where he like wakes up and he doesn't know where he is.
And it's the first part of a
hopefully
story
it's going to be a greater story arc, and so we're going to do more film stuff. So we had this idea, and then we go to the beach and we'll do this, and we plan a few shots, but then it just like kind of comes out naturally that it's a bit ridiculous. And then you see the final product and you're like, yeah, that's kind of funny, but we never really intended it to be that funny. It was actually kind of meant to be serious.
Yeah,
not serious, but like,
I think when we intend things to be serious, it usually devolves into silliness even quicker, or it allows moments of humor to come easier.
We're just not very serious people, let's be honest. If we were involved in a very serious conversation, it would be serious, but we'd still be the ones trying to wedge in a stupid joke.
I don't really like having super serious conversations, or without having some form of humor in them.
Because everything's funny, and if you can't laugh at that, then you're a fuckwit.
Well, it seems like you do take what you do seriously, even though you try and find the humor in it. Like, where do you see Ekko and Sidetrack going like 5-10 years from now? Like today, it's an event, it's a band, it's a podcast. When do we get the Ekko and Sidetrack craft brew, the record label?
Third man record style.
Yeah, 2-man records.
Yeah. I don't know, Jono. You want to start this and then I'll add my dream on top of your dream.
I've only got ridiculous answers for this.
That's good.
I think there's no ceiling to what we would do. Both of us are creatively interested in lots of other different things. And I think you said the other day, essentially we're going to try to grow what Ekko Sidetrack is and then use it to be able to do lots of other creative things, not necessarily them being Ekko Sidetrack related.
I think like we'll always make music and we'll probably always make drum and bass, and then we might get involved in more stuff. And whether it's like, I'd love to have my own studio where I work with other artists and then be able to do more design projects, art projects, film projects, collaborate with other people and like do just heaps of creative stuff. Because I think that's, as you know, as a creative person, that there's so many creative avenues. And when you meet someone that like can fill in part of the jigsaw with you, you go, holy fuck, I should start a zine because you've got a printer and you like to write and I make pictures and like, you know, so you have all these crazy ideas and they work really well, but you need other people to bounce off. I always thought like the analogy in my head is like, if you're at a club and there's like a VIP room upstairs, get really good at something that gets you into the VIP room. And when you're in the VIP room, then you can do anything you want because all the other VIPs are there. And then you're like, oh, you work in film. I'm in the VIP room as well. Oh, cool. Let's do something together. It's like the thing that got you up the stairs is one thing, but the thing that allows you to do, you can do anything once you're up there. We're trying to channel our energy into making drum and bass and like doing shows and that kind of thing. But I know that in 5 years' time, that creative energy will be split up and doing other stuff, surely.
So, Jono, I asked you to pick a few topics of other aspects of your life to talk about. Did you pick some?
Yes. What was the first one? We decided on 3, didn't we?
I like how he throws that back onto me. I don't actually have an answer.
Because I can't remember.
With Jeff, we decided on which was it? It was
the first one. I think it was music, film, and creativity.
Yeah. I mean,
we've kind of. I mean, we've spoken.
We can talk about anything though.
Well, you guys are big film guys. I feel like we could safely talk about movies for the rest of the podcast, pretty much.
We could,
yes.
But something funny on that subject is like Jono's more of a film guy than me. I can talk film and know some directors and writers and stuff like that. But recently, someone asked us like, "Oh, what's something you've watched recently that you really enjoyed?" And both of us just got that like blank brain Homer Simpson with the like old Warner Brothers cartoon characters just like dancing, like nothing. It's just like I watched a movie and Jono was like, Interstellar was good.
And that was 3 years ago.
Yeah. But
we both watched 2 movies we hadn't seen today on the plane.
What did you watch on the plane?
I watched Snowden, which has increased my paranoia by about 700%. And
Scott's recording to our conversation right now, John.
And Jeff watched
Arrival, which I hadn't seen, and like I'm shit at stuff when it comes to the movies. Like I go, oh, I want to see that, and then me and my girlfriend both go, oh, I want to see that, and then John and I'll be like, let's go see that, and then we just won't. And the way the cycle of the movies work now, it's like last 6 weeks, and you're like, oh, can I have a ticket for this? Like that's gone, long gone. So you kind of, I see probably 1 out of 10 movies that I want to see at the cinema, and then I have to find them elsewhere.
And for some reason, and this has happened over the past 5 or 6 years, I've really needed to be in the mood to watch a movie, which is a really shit thing because you should just be able to watch a movie. If you want to watch a movie, you should just be able to go to a list and say, this is what I'm up to, I'm going to watch that. But I think you've got so much choice, you can kind of go, I kind of want something that has a bit of action. I want a bit of a love story, but not too much comedy.
Cutthroat Island.
Yeah, like, you know, and find the perfect movie for that perfect moment to fit all like your current emotional state.
We actually, it took 4 years to watch The Wrestler with Mickey Rourke in it.
Yeah.
We both knew we wanted to watch it. We both knew it was going to be good. It was going to be dramatic, and it was probably going to be like a tough movie. Like it was told a really good story. The amount of times we saw that and went, yeah, can't.
At least once a month, I reckon. At least once a month there was a moment us two were together, and we're like, "What do you want to watch?"
The rest?
The rest was right there. No, I'm a bit hungover, man. Like, I don't know if I can handle it.
And then one night we just committed. And it was great. Awesome movie. Arguably probably not as kind of heavy as we thought it was going to be, but it's really cool.
It is so weird, like in the super abundance of options we have today for media, for what to consume, like it's harder than ever to commit to doing something and making a choice. Like when you're a kid, when you have like 7 movies on VHS in the house, if you got a free afternoon, it's like, yes, watch The Lion King again.
Yeah, exactly.
And you've seen it a million times. And now there's like thousands of movies you have on your streaming service that you should see, movies you should have seen, and you're just like, ugh.
Man, I was going through Netflix the other day, and probably every second like line of 4 movies, there was a movie that I was like, I want to see that for ages. But again, I'm not really in the mood, and just kept going through. And then after like 40 minutes of looking through that and Stan, I had 25 options of movies I wanted to watch, but not at that moment.
Yeah, all added to your watch list.
Yeah, like, and I didn't end up watching a movie. I think I watched like...
I've only got time now for a series.
Oh, like 15 minutes of some shit Netflix documentary about prostitutes or like some weird
I know what
thing.
kind of a mood you were in.
Just like, something that was just there, or that was, continue watching for my housemate or something like that, which is a complete waste of watching time. Like, we don't have a lot of watching time.
But that just shows the kind of commitment you're prepared to give to a movie. It's like you want to commit to it, but sometimes you can just like turn something on and be like, yeah, whatever. And like, I don't know, there's movies, again, I compartmentalize all these movies. I'm like, I want a comedy that's pretty like low energy, whatever, like I don't have to think too much about it. Or I want to commit to like a dramatic thing, or like, yeah, like I've got all these I've got an intricate Venn diagram in my head, and the focus switches around, and I need the correct balance of things. Otherwise, it just feels like the wrong movie. But typically, 15 minutes into a movie, you're like, wicked, I'm into this.
All the time. I remember we did that with Carlito's Way.
Oh, I got to see that. I'm really on an Al Pacino kick at the moment.
Oh, nice.
I'm not someone who has favorite actors, really. Like, I have a few favorite directors, but I'm more about, what genre am I into? I don't really care who's on screen, but I've just been digging Al Pacino so much lately. Just last night I watched And Justice for All. Have you seen that?
No.
It's from like the late 70s. It's the movie that has the scene, you're out of order, this whole court is out of order.
Right.
That's where that comes from. He plays like a lawyer going up against like the corrupt
not blind,
system.
is he?
No, that's An Officer and a Gentleman.
A Scent of a Woman.
Scent of a Woman. It was the first movie role for Jeffrey Tambor from Arrested Development. And he plays like his lawyer friend who kind of has a mental breakdown. He like throws plates at people and shaves his head and stuff.
Wow.
Such a good movie. And I've been watching all his early stuff like Serpico, Dog Day Afternoon, Heat. Have you seen Heat?
Heat is an amazing movie.
Oh, and the soundtrack on that pulsing electronic stuff. Oh, love Heat.
Heat's so crazy because it's one of those movies that's kind of like broken up. Really, the acts are very blatant. Like, they plan it, they execute it, and then it's like they disperse, and it's like, what happens? Yeah, I watched that maybe 2 years ago again.
Al Pacino's he's an actor with a lot of range. Like early on, he played a lot of real innocent kind of characters who are fighting against the man, and then later on he was more chewing the scenery and more villainous roles. But in every movie he's in, and in at least one scene, he does that crazy Pacino thing where he goes, ah! And like, you can't see us on the podcast, but where his eyes kind of light up and he bares his teeth and he laughs a bit crazy. He does that in every role.
Devil's Advocate?
Yes.
Yeah. And he's like... So he's always just a bit evil, and then he's like, "You don't think I'm Satan?" And he's like, does that like crazy fucking thing. You're like, "Whoa, Al!"
He always does rants as well.
Oh yeah.
Like if you watch too many of his films in a row, you really can start picking holes in his, not necessarily what he does as an actor, but maybe just the roles that he's been chosen for. There's always like a rant. There's always him yelling, especially towards the end, like the mid-90s, late 90s.
Yeah, even before that, both Dog Day Afternoon and Justice for All, Scarface, all have big monologues at the end before something explosive happens. I don't actually like Scarface that much. I've watched it twice, and the first time I just didn't. It's just very long.
It's long,
kind of ugly, and
I don't reckon you connect with Tony Montana.
Yeah,
is that you don't care?
Yeah,
like by the end you're like, he's an arsehole, especially when his friend hooks up with his sister, and you're like, he wants to get out. It's like there's going to be a good aspect, and then Tony just goes crazy, and like, spoiler alert, he kills him.
It's not like Godfather, where he's like starts off as the innocent son that's out of the mob, and then rises to the occasion to take over the family, and you kind of see him turn from this war hero to a head of a criminal family.
There's no transition.
That's interesting. At the start of Scarface, he's a piece of shit. He's just a
the hardcore
low
guy
piece of shit
that'll stab the dude in the refugee camp.
Yeah, and then he just rises to the top.
And you never really find out, like, was he a scumbag like that back in Cuba, or like you don't see it? Yeah, there's no transformation really once he gets to Miami.
Sometimes with those kinds of movies, there's that element of it's less of a transformation story, more of a portrait of a crazy person.
Yeah,
it's like this person is just like nothing stops them. They're just nuts.
Have you seen Nightcrawler?
No. Oh, I really want to see that.
That's one for that. Yeah, but
it's movies. One of the 10. I completely forgot about it.
I watched that recently, and but that's a clever one because the character doesn't change over the course of the movie. Like, he is a creep throughout the whole thing, but how much of a creep he is and what he's willing to do is slowly kind of revealed to the audience. So it doesn't feel off in that way.
Yeah.
I think as well, like, you don't always have to like the protagonist.
Oh, yeah.
I think people, myself included, have gotten used to watching films where the main character is the hero and you have to like him. It's very challenging to watch a film where the protagonist is a real piece of shit, because the story has to be so compelling that you are along for the ride no matter what.
I feel like there's been a big rise of the anti-hero archetype on television in the last 15 years or so, coming off the back of The Sopranos, arguably.
Yeah.
And I think it's a lot easier to pull off the anti-hero, the protagonist who you don't necessarily like. It's easier to do that on TV because there's more often a larger cast.
Yeah.
And so you've got B and C stories that you can focus on of people actually, who you might care more about.
And you've also got a longer period of time where you can reveal the many layers to that character. Like, Tony Soprano starts off being a piece of shit, but as it's revealed, like, he's a very flawed guy. Like, he's a very human guy, which I think a lot of people liked The Sopranos because he was like an everyman. He just happened to be have this crazy job, essentially.
Yeah, and there have been so many of them, like your Don Draper on Mad Men. And there's a lot of mystery around him. And by the end of it, he's very much demystified as a character, and you really pity him more than dislike him.
Mm.
Well, that's more reality as well. Like, I think shows have never been more real in some respects. Like, I feel like there's a valley of sugar sweet stuff. It's either like crazy unreal or very real.
Well, what would be an example of either?
Like, there's The Walking Dead, which is just unreal with almost like Hollywood stereotypes, or like a action hero movie, like a Marvel movie or something. It's like all unreal, suspend your disbelief, versus really real would be something like The Wrestler. But that middle ground where in the 90s there was a shitload of that kind of stuff.
Kind of like True Lies.
Yeah,
True Lies would be in the middle where it's slightly unrealistic, but it's not so much over the top, and you kind of end with everyone kind of being happy and the bad guy lost, and it's all kind of okay. You don't
everything's wrapped up with a little bow.
You don't leave True Lies thinking like, fuck man.
You think, fuck man,
That was crazy. Like, Jamie Lee Curtis, like, what's she going to do now or anything like that? There's no questions being answered. It's just purely entertainment. I think now movies and TV shows are being made for a smarter audience. Like, even, I'm not a massive fan of the Marvel films, but I'm kind of rewatching them all in some sort of order just to see what the Marvel universe is like. We're about to watch The Avengers 2, Age of Ultron. I was reading about it, and there's a scene where it's like revealed that Black Widow, Scarlett Johansson's character, was made infertile. And that's like a pretty interesting, and especially because it's like a feminine issue, it's a pretty interesting thing to be put into a Hollywood popcorn blockbuster movie, which I hadn't really thought about before. So I think like even these blockbusters are still asking interesting questions because all around I think audiences are getting smarter.
Do either of you have any movie opinions that are unpopular? Are there any sacred cows that you really hate, or are there any widely hated movies you think are actually a masterpiece?
This could be a long list while I try and think about it. I think it's probably not that uncommon, like the whole Star Trek thing. Don't get it, don't care.
I didn't hate Phantom Menace.
Oh, okay.
I think that was the best one out of the
prequels.
But I reckon Phantom Menace, it's like it became cool to hate on because
Jar Jar
Binks and like it was made at just the wrong time for CGI. At the time, it blew all our minds. But you look back now, it's like aged so badly. As any of those movies that have like Jumanji and stuff like that, like.
But The Departed.
Didn't like The Departed?
I just think it's not Martin Scorsese's best film.
Should not have won the Oscar.
I don't think he should have won the Oscar for it, one. I feel like The Departed was maybe one of the first Scorsese movies a lot of people that were my age watched and were like, oh man, have you heard of this movie called The Departed?
It's got Leonardo DiCaprio.
And I felt like saying, fuck The Departed, go watch Casino, or go watch Goodfellas, or go watch Cape Fear, or go watch fucking the boxing one, Jay Montoya, Raging Bull, or any of those films, which are much better. So there's probably a bit of resentment for that reason.
All those Boston crime dramas just blur together in my mind. All the ones with Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah, the Boston accent is also...
Park your car.
Park your car. You son of a bitch.
Ben Affleck's in all of them as well.
Yeah, yeah.
But the, what's the Whitey Bulger story with Johnny Depp?
Yeah.
Black Mass. That was pretty good.
Again, yeah, true story that like kind of from that, it felt like a blow kind of thing, like told over 10 years, but it wasn't bad. I think I stopped watching it halfway because I had a copy that was acquired somewhat unscrupulously and the sound was really bad. It's like it was 5.1 and they'd converted it down to one track, so like sounds were muffled and I was like, it's really quiet and I can't watch this. It's just terrible.
Sometimes you get a movie through various means that the picture quality is really good, and because like they post a preview of it before you download it, so you can say, oh yeah, that quality's good, but the sound has been compressed to like 96 kbps or something, and there's all these explosions that like, oh, they sound like an NES, Duck Hunt or something.
Yeah. What about you? Do you have any films that
I've got quite a few. I've got a big one. I really enjoyed Catwoman, which is one of the most reviled movies of all time.
I think you just blew us all out of the board.
I don't think I've ever seen it.
It's absolutely worth seeing. It's a really fun movie. I think it won both the Razzie for worst movie and worst performance in the lead role, and Halle Berry showed up to accept it, and she thanked her agent for putting her in, quote, such a piece of shit movie. But it's so fun, and it's got that Phantom Menace like Uncanny Valley CGI where it's really bad, but it's just fun. And it doesn't take itself seriously at all. And it's actually quite a strong feminist movie as well. Like both her and the main villain are both really strong female characters. And there's just a lot of kind of girl power stuff in it that really hasn't been seen a lot since in superhero movies. It's kind of like, oh, did they sink it for that cause? Like,
are they doing Wonder Woman?
Yeah, Wonder Woman's there was a trailer out for that.
Oh man, DC needs to get back to its grit. DC needs to go. Marvel does the shiny stuff. We do the gritty stories. Let's go gritty.
But they've been trying to do gritty and they suck ass.
Suicide Squad, I haven't seen it, but everyone was excited by that trailer. Everyone that went and saw it were like, are you fucking serious?
But again, another thing they've heavily recut.
Yeah. And you can tell when you watch it, like, there's two different movies here that I'm seeing that have been mashed together in some grotesque concoction.
When was the last good DC comic? Like, I would say Man of Steel was the closest they came.
Who cares?
To making a solid
story. That's like, I don't know. They seem to make things that don't hit. That said, I'm not their target, or even I didn't really watch Marvel movies. The ones I liked Deadpool and I liked Guardians of the Galaxy. Otherwise, people are like, man, the Avengers. I'm like, how can they all come together? I don't care. Don't tell me. Just leave it.
One of the issues I have actually watching all the Avengers movies or the standalone things, like I watched Thor and the Iron Mans. After they all get together, the next one is Thor 2. He's got like 7 fucking parallel universes being lined up all in a hole, and this evil guy has like the power of the universe on some sort of staff. This shit is going on in London, yet none of the other Avengers are doing anything about it.
Yeah, that's always
so what are they going to be doing when this is going on?
And there's always a bit of lip service paid to that in a throwaway line that never makes sense in a few of those movies. Like in Ant-Man, one of the guys is like, shouldn't the Avengers be taking care of this or something?
Yeah.
Because it was always like that in the comics as well. Like, why isn't every giant threat to humanity being dealt with by all the superheroes?
Yeah. I'm trying to think. It was a really good question. Like, the unpopular views on movies. I've heard podcasts that all talk about like the 70s being this iconic era for film, and I must admit I have not seen any movies of that era. Like to the point where the podcaster like Bret Easton Ellis was talking about like movies with, I think it was a Quentin Tarantino one.
Yeah.
They're talking about movies and it sounded like they were all made up titles. Like, Flowers Through the Moon. The performance was inspired. Flowers Through the Moon. When the director did The Palisades, it was creative, like tour de force. And you're like, these movies do not exist. It sounds like you're talking about fake movies to my ears. So I feel like there's a whole shitload of movies that I have not seen and have not experienced. So my iconic movie reference, I'm trying to think of like a top 5 movies for me would probably involve a Christopher Nolan movie, a French movie, something by Jean-Pierre Jeunet, or one of those guys, something like Adaptation.
Oh, a Charlie Kaufman.
Yeah, Charlie Kaufman thing, and then probably a popcorn movie, and then something else that I can't remember.
Princess Bride.
But I don't have this cinematic history. And I probably don't know, to answer the question, I probably don't know enough people's views on certain movies.
Right, okay.
To have an unpopular one. I don't get off on the Marvel ones at all. Like I said, Guardians of the Galaxy, Deadpool. Otherwise, you can fuck right off.
On Jean-Pierre Jeunet, what did you think of Alien Resurrection?
Loved it.
Yeah. Correct answer.
One of my favorite of the Alien movies.
Yes, right?
I think it's
underrated.
Better. I like the third one because Fincher did it, and I like scenes from that. There's good scenes. All around shit movie.
Is the Fincher one the one where they're like on the red planet and they're like the monks?
Yeah. So it's like a prison, but there's all these religious overtones as well.
And Resurrection is the one with
Winona Ryder.
Yeah, with the big tower and like it's like there's heaps more aliens and it's quite bright. Yeah,
and it's on
a space station.
Yes.
And they're trying to remake Ripley.
Yeah, it's a clone of Ripley in the movie because it's like 200 years in the future after she died. Spoiler alert in Alien 3.
Yeah, in the hot lava thing.
Yeah, to destroy the alien that was inside her. Yeah. And that doesn't make any sense. Like because they were after the alien that was in her belly, so they cloned the human. I don't think it works that way.
No.
But I liked Alien Resurrection because Joss Whedon wrote it.
Yeah.
And have you guys seen Firefly?
Yes.
No.
How much of the crew of that ship is just the Firefly archetypes, just like the dry run of that?
I liked Serenity,
yeah,
which is the film.
Yeah.
And I think I watched like half of Firefly, and couldn't get into it as much as I did Serenity.
Interesting.
Because I think it felt like Farscape to me.
Oh, yeah.
I think if I went back and watched Farscape, I'd probably enjoy it more. But Farscape has this, I got this weird Channel 9
once
being
again,
12.
it's like shit kind of shows, and we're at the age of like, I don't buy that CG kind of weirdness. Like, see, if you watch Sequest DSV now, it would not hold up. You'd be like, get the fuck out. But I remember it so fondly, like Sliders. Like, oh man,
Sliders is still holds up. I went back and watched, I think I got through the first season. Still good.
Well, maybe it is, but like, there's a certain thing that there is definitely a zone of time where like the movies, you're not going to remember them as fondly because of a certain age you are. And I reckon there's like pulling away from like what is normal. Like a popcorn movie that came out when I was 15, I'd be like, yes, or like watch that. And by the time I was like 19, I felt like that was the mainstream, and I was trying to push more into the counterculture just by nature of being a 19-year-old. Like, oh, I'm going to watch a foreign movie rather than...
When did Amelie come out?
I don't know, but that's
2001,
one of my favorite.
I think.
Yeah.
So it's like 10, when I was 10.
Are you getting to that point where movies that have come out in your lifetime, like younger people are pointing to that and being like, that's a classic movie, and you're just like, that was just a super mainstream blah nothing movie?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, what was the movie you wanted to watch with your girlfriend? And she was like, we can't watch that. It's like, it's old.
She didn't want to watch Titanic, but I don't think she didn't want to watch Titanic because it was old. There was another film.
Something like The Fifth Element. If you tried to show that to a kid now, some of them would be like, "This, what the fuck?"
Fuck, that's 20 years ago.
But that's such a good movie. Have you seen the trailer for his new thing?
Oh yeah, it looks the one based on like the Belgian graphic novel.
Yeah, and looks incredible.
Valerian or something.
Yeah, it looks sick.
I'm trying to think of when movies really started to ramp up in their like speed and action, because people's attention spans have gotten smaller and smaller. A movie like that was made in 2005 is going to feel slow compared to a movie that was made in 2010.
And a movie made in 1987
is going to feel
quite slow. Like if you watch Carlito's Way, it doesn't have the same beats as even a Casino or a Goodfellas. It's like they worked out a bit more of the rhythm. Like Carlito's Way is quite like, at moments it kind of like wavers a bit, like why do I care so much about this? And then you brought back onto story, and like things get a bit weird. It's almost like Scarface and Carlito's Way feel similar. I think some of those older movies, like, they do their slow burners.
It's like the difference between Mission Impossible 1 and the rest of the series.
Oh yeah.
Like if you watch Mission Impossible 1 now, it's like a cool, it's slightly like, it's more of a spy.
It's a lot more James Bondy.
Yeah.
Like old school James Bond. Yeah.
And like the personal story of Ethan Hunt and how he kind of became who he is and his struggle. And then the latest one, which was good, was just a bit shallow.
And all about like the set pieces and the action.
It was like a modern James Bond one. Even the new James Bond.
Spectre.
I was like, I enjoyed it, but I think Sam Mendes does stuff that looks nicer than the substance it is.
Yeah, I enjoyed Spectre more than the last couple, I think. I felt it was a bit of a throwback to the old ones. It was more just like the locations and the scenery and less about huge spectacular action.
Yeah, I enjoyed the fact, to be honest, I enjoyed Spectre when I realized that it was referencing a lot of the old things. Like the Spectre was the group that all the bad guys used to be part of, and the guy
Blofeld.
Yeah, with his cat was a guy who was in like 3 or 4 referenced in 3 or 4 of the other old Bond movies, so it's like getting back to that universe. But I don't know, I enjoyed it for what it was, but I mean Bond movies are never going to be highbrow.
It wasn't Casino Royale.
I'd say that was kind of a bit of a turning point when we're talking about action speeding up. I think part of it was CGI driven. You had movies like The Matrix and Lord of the Rings where you were seeing like really spectacular out there shit on screen that was not physically possible to portray before.
I reckon the Lord of the Rings, when they did that, maybe it was Two Towers, just that Battle of Helm's Deep.
Oh my God.
And you were like,
yeah,
whoa, this is not real, or they shot the right amount of miniatures and practical effects and stuff. But
and that was 2002.
Yeah, you realized you could do this kind of a thing in cinema, and then everyone was like, oh shit, all right, we can do that. We just got to get Weta involved and they'll do all the effects. And it became this kind of like, we can shoot anything. Put them on a green screen, we'll make it happen.
You know, the other thing in terms of editing, I think, was the Bourne Identity. Was shooting action scenes with like 70 cuts in 30 seconds or whatever.
Yeah, I hate
Paul Greengrass.
And all that shaky cam, handheld camera.
It's too much. He's like a documentary, came from documentary movies. And he made another film about Black Friday and Protestant and Irish, Protestant Catholic fight in the 80s, I want to say. And heaps of people died. That was like I think that was his first drama. And that's super handheld, lots of cuts. It kind of looks a bit cheap. I like the Bourne movies. And I even preferred Greengrass to, I think Greengrass did Bourne Identity. And then someone else did the next one, and then he came back.
The Bourne movies, I've read all the Bourne books.
Oh yeah,
and like the books are so much better. Like the Carlos the Jackal relationship, and like it's as any Tom Clancy book or is it Robert Ludlum?
That was Ludlum. Bourne, yeah.
Just that relationship of the characters and everything. As any book is going to be richer than a film. But when Jason Bourne came out, like the Bourne Identity, I was like, this is going to be great. And then I realized, oh shit, we're in for a franchise here. They've just grabbed another, like, he's James Bond, but he's not James Bond.
He's faster, he's meaner, he's younger.
Yeah.
And then they made James Bond like that.
Yeah, exactly. Who's going to be the next James Bond? Is it going to be Idris Elba?
I don't know. I kind of, like people always, whenever they're speculating about who the next Bond is, they always talk about names. You know, known quantities and suave-looking men. But really, the best Bonds have been unknowns, I think. Like, where the fuck did Daniel Craig come from?
I don't know.
Like,
he'd done, like, Layer Cake and a bunch of English television.
He'd done a few little iconic things that he was enough known as an actor. I like him as a Bond.
I think he was a good Bond.
An unpopular opinion I really like Pierce Brosnan as a Bond as well.
Yep, definitely.
And some people are like, he was the worst Bond. No, the worst Bond was George Lazenby. Let's be honest. He was literally like, was he a model from Melbourne or something? Like, he just like, terrible Bond. Shit. But yeah, I really like Pierce Brosnan. Again, maybe it's because it's the era we grew up in.
Yeah.
And
GoldenEye.
Yeah, GoldenEye was classic. But GoldenEye was after...
GoldenEye was 95.
Okay.
And there was like a 6-year gap from License to Kill.
Timothy Dalton was License to Kill. And Timothy Dalton, in my head, I'm like, he's the quintessential 80s Bond. He's the perfect, like, giant jaw, dimpled chin.
And I liked him as a Bond, but then he also sticks in my mind as the evil guy from...
Hot Fuzz.
Yes. Yes, he's the guy that owns the supermarket.
Yes. But he's also kind of the evil guy in Bond. Like, he was kind of a much meaner Bond than Roger Moore before him. Like, didn't he feed a guy to a shark or something?
Yeah, you watch old Roger Moore, almost like you feel at any moment he could just wink at the camera. Like,
I'm pretty sure he did.
There's a
couple
certain
times.
campness to it.
Yeah.
Like, Sean Connery had a seriousness. Roger Moore just like, it was almost like everything he was just like could look and like grin and like, okay, let's do this.
And I feel like Brosnan actually brought that back a little bit towards, I think the last two were kind of a bit ridiculous.
World Is Not Enough could be the worst Bond. I personally like Tomorrow Never Dies.
I like Tomorrow Never Dies.
Yeah. But I like one of my main memories from Tomorrow Never Dies is watching a special that was on of like movie mistakes that would have been on like Channel 10 or something like that on a Sunday night, and it highlighting the fact that the chick's arm is like twice as long.
Oh, when she's on the motorbike.
When they're on the motorbike. and that's all I could see whenever I watched it. And then, like, you can see that they're actually writing on boxes.
Is The World Is Not Enough the one with the media mogul?
No, that's Tomorrow Never Dies.
Okay.
World Is Not Enough is the guy with the bullet in his brain.
And the diamonds and the ice and he surfs the ice wave.
No, that's Die Another Day.
Die Another Day was the last one, which is...
Yeah.
That's the worst. Yeah. That's the worst. Maybe The World Is Not Enough is okay.
Well, see, I feel like World Is Not Enough to Die Another Day has like the ridiculousness relationship of Batman Forever and Batman and Robin.
Yeah.
Like World Is Not Enough and Batman Forever were dips in quality and they were starting to get ridiculous. Has the classic Denise Richards.
Yeah.
Denise Richards is like the nuclear scientist.
And she had a really ridiculous name.
Christmas Jones.
Yes.
Yeah.
Christmas only came once a year was the pun. But so, and then Die Another Day went out and out ridiculous, surfing down like the giant wave Antarctica. And that was like full on Batman and Robin lunacy.
Yeah.
And had like a space laser weapon with the North Koreans. And it was kind of more entertaining for that. But at the same time, it couldn't have gone on like that.
No, again, I reckon Bond movies hit like an engine that hits like red lines and then just like it's so close to blowing up and they're like, all right, let's get a new actor and we'll start it all again. We'll just chill back down. We'll do a bit of an origin thing.
It came back so well with Casino Royale. So well. I think that's the most solid Bond movie. I would even say Casino Royale, then GoldenEye, then like Thunderball or one of the Connery ones.
I like the old, I think it was the Roger Moore ones had amazing technology. Like it's almost like they had the budget for the props, and that's like when the car flew and stuff like that. It's like so ridiculous. Like, oh, James Bond is at it again. He's got a flying car that just like at a press of a button, he's like a boat, and then it just takes off. Like so good.
I like the gyrocopter that comes in a box from Q.
Yeah,
and it's so impressive. Back in the day, that was like a real gyrocopter.
Yeah.
That someone who looked a lot like Sean Connery had to fly.
Yeah. Probably hurt himself several times. Again, I reckon a lot of the movies we're referencing fall in that late 90s, early 2000s when movies themselves were finding that mark. Like, how do we market ourselves, make shit tons of money, but still stay not relevant, but it's got to have enough glitz that it's going to sell.
And it was a huge time of change technologically. So not only in the stuff we see on screen with all this CGI that now looks pretty dated most of the time, but also I think in editing, that's when they started to edit digitally as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they kind of start to transition away from film stock to digital files and that.
Yeah.
Which would totally change. I can't even imagine how much that changed how you edit a movie.
Oh.
Well, it changed how you shot it because suddenly you went from a massive part of your budget being film stock and being like, we have to get this in 15 minutes or 15 minutes of take because we've got an allocated amount of stock for this scene, to just going like, run the camera. We can just keep the camera running for 4 hours. Let's just keep going and going and going. And it allowed people like, I know David Fincher takes like a ridiculous amount of takes, like nearly 30 to 40 to get things exactly perfect. But it's also allowed people to just do whatever, and you could play it in 20 different ways and then just go, yeah, I will decide on the cutting room floor. You were cutting like a ridiculous amount of footage. Maybe you missed footage, or I don't know. I think
story gets lost and diluted.
Yeah, definitely.
And actors' performances get so skewed like that. You can really tell when a movie's been over-edited when between two different shots of an actor's face, they have totally different emotions.
I think I listened to a podcast recently with Martin Scorsese's editor, the woman, what's her name?
Thelma Schumacher.
Yeah. And she was talking about how she got hired, and she was like, I had experience cutting film. I'm going to fuck this up, so you should listen to the podcast. I think it's
Alec
Baldwin.
Oh, I've heard a few of his,
Yeah. Here's the thing.
Yeah.
And she basically had experience cutting actual film, and then she goes like, oh, I'm going to go to film school. And she went to film school, and then in the editing class, like real early on, someone came in and was like, one of our graduates needs help cutting his film. Like, does anyone have any, like, want to help out? And she was like, oh yeah, I'd love to. And she was the only one that had actual experience cutting real film. And so Marty was like, because I know him personally, Martin Scorsese was like, oh wow, like, can I use you on my next thing? And then that just like snowballed. And then she's done every movie of his other, like, except one or something. And she was talking about like the act of cutting a movie was a physical thing, and you had to be precise, and you had to check twice, and you had to get everything right. Now it's like, just like line up your playhead and cut a little bit out, and oh, you made the wrong cut, we can grab it back. This is what it was actually. I lie. He had to repair his film because someone had fucked it up, and she'd had experience cutting and working with film.
Rework.
So she had to re-put stuff back together, and then he asked her to do it, edit the thing. So she had this technical, physical experience that was the reason she got the job. And then she was like, it had to be like that from then on in. It just like, that's how I learned how to cut movies. And like she was talking about like beats in a movie, like the rhythm of a film, I suppose. Have you ever watched any of those YouTube videos, like Every Frame a Painting?
I've heard of them. Yeah.
He talks about, he's an editor, isn't he?
I think so.
Yeah, and he talks about like incredible, he just gives wicked examples of like, how does this scene feel? And then here is the exact same feeling, but I've cut like 2 seconds off the start and 2 seconds off the end. And it's like, it's completely different. It's like you don't get it. And he does ones with like music and yeah, incredible stuff.
Well, yeah, I guess the way we make music has changed in a similar way. And it happened probably earlier. We started recording and producing digitally earlier than we did movies. But it's weird to think that, I guess, the kind of music you make, would that even be possible to do that like on analog tape?
Yeah, early drum and bass is kind of like dated probably at around 94. And this is like guys with samplers and very early computers. We've talked to some old producers, and they talked about like using a sampler and then like chopping up a drum beat and then like choosing to render something, literally leaving it overnight to render like seconds of audio, and then being like, oh, I got that wrong, I've got to do that again. And then like so much of the sound came from the gear, like the way you can redline a synthesizer through a piece of analog gear is different to how a computer handles it. So all these old tunes sound in a different way. Whether or not it went to tape, I'm sure early stuff would have gone to tape at some point. DAT tapes? Yeah, it was DAT. It was a lot of DAT tapes in samplers and stuff. So like old tunes used to exist as DAT tapes, and then they take the DAT tape to a place called Music House in London, where you'd cut like a dub plate. There was a lathe there, and so you turn up with your DAT tape and be like, can you cut me one of these? And everyone would just sit there and wait for like their record to be cut. But obviously because it's cutting on a lathe, it plays while it's cut. So people sitting there would hear this song and they'd be like, man, cut me one of those. And that's like early culture, like mid-90s drum and bass and like underground music was like, if you went to Music House and you were a DJ and you knew the guys enough to ask, then you'd have that tune that no one else would have, because literally the guy just turned up with his DAT tape. So like it's pretty, it informed, the limitations informed the music at the time. And now we can just like make a tune with, 300 tracks and as many compressors as we want and blah, blah, blah. And like almost you want the limitation somewhat.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask, is there any kind of fetishization of that analog process in the drum and bass scene like there is in rock? Like in rock, there's, you're getting people who are like, oh yeah, we really want to record reel to reel with this album. It's to get that warm, authentic sound.
And then we all watch each other masturbating in the back room. It's like, well, that is true. It's like it has a certain sound, and like some of those bands that have that wicked dusty vibe, it's because they're using mics from 1970. And they're using gear that is, it's funny, gear in the 90s, they would have been like, oh yeah, get rid of that shitty Neve desk. We don't need that thing anymore. And now everyone's like, where's the desk? Did we sell it 20 years ago? Because I think where's all the valve stuff we used to have?
But does that now have a sound just because everyone is going so clean and digital? And it's just different. It's not necessarily that it's so much better than digital. It just stands out because it's different.
It's the pendulum swinging back away from like the silky smooth overproduced pop stuff. There's always a like counterculture to the thing that's kind of popular or something. If some band goes here and it's like sugary sweet, then there's going to be the other bands that come out and go gnarly. It's like grunge was a direct reaction to like hair metal, and then after grunge you had like launch of like boy bands, girl bands, and then I don't know, things have really splintered now. Who knows what's going on? But like there is definitely that fetishization of analog gear. Like there's a lot of guys going back to modular.
What's that mean?
Like modular synthesis. So like you've got like a little module that it does one thing.
Oh, like a physical box?
A physical box.
Oh, right. That you have to plug into other things.
Yeah. So like guitar pedals. So like this little box makes a saw wave, a sine wave, a triangle, and like it does this weird random thing. And then you need a box that does the next step. So like, and then you get like 5 of these things packed up, and all of a sudden you're making a sound based on like all these like different inputs and routings of very simple processes, and then treating those sounds through all sorts of other gear. I think people like the analog thing because it's seemingly more hands-on. Like I reckon if you made like even just running something through like a little amp like that over there has an interesting
playing to the Golden Ton shitbox.
Yeah.
As I call it. the brand is Golden Ton. I call it Little Shitbox because I'll show you it later. It makes the most amazing sound. Like, it's a whole thing. Sorry, go on.
The thing with the Strokes' first album, like, Is This It? They went around, they got offered to record in all these studios in New York and London and stuff, and they found this underground place, and the engineer was a Pro Tools guy, and at the time, very few people ran direct to digital, and he goes, you're going to record here, and basically after you finish the song within 10 minutes I can have like a really rough demo of what the song sounds like, rather than being like, all right, we're going to dub this back in, we're going to do that bit again, I got that bit but we'll go back in, and like whereas what a lot of the big studios were doing, they were harnessing all this technology. This guy was like, I've got a computer, we'll run everything direct. And the thing that made Julian Casablancas' vocals sound like they did is they ran his vocals through a small guitar amp.
Yeah, it sounds like compressed to hell. And
then the band was like, I want limitations of like, I want basically the effects on my amp plus one pedal or something. And so like the distortion is like, you had the clean sound of your amp, and then you had like the amplifier's stomp box. It's like you're turning on that distortion. You don't have like a 10,000 pedals in front of you. You can make all sorts of combinations. There's drums on that album. I'm not sure how well you know the album, but like,
yeah, Is This It? Yeah,
there's
it sound for Fabrizio Moretti, right, the drummer. He sounds like a drum machine, and like I heard
was the goal.
He practiced like with metronomes like all night for like 8 months or whatever to sound like a drum machine.
Yeah, and they also did things like gating on their like drum kits, so they'd like run it super hot like through a compressor, then into a gate, and then just like drop their threshold right up. So basically all you were getting was like the transient, like there are no drum machines on that album, but they did stuff to make it sound like a drum machine.
Yeah.
So, and again, this is all stuff that like the limitations of the rooms, of the like rawness of it all, and then running it into digital, which was really easy. So it was like, at the time the technology was really easy, so it was so good for workflow. But now it seems like we're so used to it that it's just like that's how you work. Therefore, like we're going to be really slow about our process. We're going to be really like meticulous and stuff like that. Whereas when was that? 2001, 2000.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, this is just a heaps better version of tape. Just run everything to it. Oh, there's different tracks? Sweet.
They kind of got the best kind of sounds from all these eras. Like they got like the sound of Lou Reed singing in a closet in 1960 with like the guitars of Television from 1979 with like the sound of a drum machine from 1983, and they put all on an album together.
Yeah. But maybe without being so obvious. I feel like some bands that come together now, like I like some of those kind of raw 70s inspired bands like King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard or something that have this like real psychedelic thing, but it seems very obviously psychedelic. It's like, this is what we're doing. We're part of this group. And like props to those guys. They're doing it really well. But the Strokes maybe sounded less like a pastiche of other stuff or a throwback.
I feel like they're kind of like a Quentin Tarantino band. Like they didn't sound like an emulation of one particular sound. They took a few bits from a few different eras.
And that was maybe, I think, and this is all learnt from reading. I listened to Is This It recently, and I was just like, listen to it completely different now as a music producer. I'm like, what the fuck? And I just went like on a big, long like reading spree about it. I think they performed at Glastonbury, and then they sent demos to a label, and the label were like, we'll love it. And they were like, great, because our goal for the album is to do everything exactly opposite to what we sent you. And they're all like classically trained dudes, like really, really good musicians. And then they came together and like they wanted to bring their really high level knowledge of music and like really simplify it. But they made such catchy fucking songs.
And didn't like Julian Casablancas, didn't he write like just about all the songs on the first 3 albums on piano or like on keyboards?
Maybe.
Even the guitar bits?
I don't know. He's quite prolific. And again, in that, you know, New York kind of crazy, God knows what drugs he was on, but like just like ego got in the way massively by the end to the point where they were recording everything, and then like he'd come in and just like do bits, and then he'd record stuff, and then like, oh, you can use that or not. Oh, like, I don't like this song. Or like, I think I haven't listened to. Did they put something new out recently?
Like maybe 2 or 3 years ago was their last one. I kind of divide them into 2 periods. There's like the first 3 albums, and then they kind of imploded for a bit. Then they got back together, and they've done another 2 since then, which have been more kind of group efforts, I gather.
Between those 2 groups, is that when Julian Casablancas did his own thing?
Yes. Yeah, I think they all did their own solo things in between.
So maybe the drummer who just went and hung out in New York and banged heaps of models or something.
Probably.
And he was married to Drew Barrymore for a while, I think.
Yeah. Oh, he was.
Yeah. Or was the drummer, or was the other guitarist?
If you think of them, in my mind, they all look similar to each other.
They do.
Julian Casablancas, because I'm like, but the guitarist, like the curly haired looking like slightly shorter guy, like maybe a little bit bigger, plays guitar super high. The lead guitarist, I can't remember his name, but then there's that guy, and then there's Fabrizio, who was like the good looking, again, curly haired fucking New York Italian guy, and then I can't remember what the other guy looked like.
I swear they look exactly the same as the Mars Volta. Essentially.
No, there's that one guy that looks like the Mars Volta. The lead guy in the Mars Volta.
So the lead guy in the Mars Volta looks like
George Costanza. No, not really.
Oh, guys, I think I need to take a break, but thank you so much for being on my podcast.
No worries.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Cheers.
I hope it's worth releasing. Cheers.
Thanks so much to my cousins Jeff and Jono for indulging me. If you want to hear more of their musings on electronic music and movies, they have their own podcast called The Adventures of Ekko and Sidetrack. You should be able to find that wherever you download podcasts. And check out their music, of course. SoundCloud would probably be the best place to find that. The spelling of Ekko is E-K-K-O, Sidetrack, S-I-D-E-T-R-A-C-K. So many corrections for this episode. Oh my god, this segment was brought to you by IMDb. First of all, Australian musician Chet Faker based his name on the American jazz musician Chet Baker. In September 2016, Chet Faker changed his stage name back to his real name, Nicholas Murphy. In the Triple J Hottest 100 of 2014, his song Talk Is Cheap came in at number 1. He also had another 2 songs in the top 10 and a cover version at number 21. In 2005, the film Catwoman starring Halle Berry was nominated for 7 Golden Raspberries, or Razzie Awards, and it won 4, including Worst Director, Worst Screenplay, Worst Actress, and Worst Picture. A clean sweep. Halle Berry accepted her award in person, and her exact words were, "First of all, I want to thank Warner Brothers. Thank you for putting me in a piece of shit, god-awful movie. It was just what my career needed." I still reckon it's worth a watch. Go check it out. It's pretty fun. The Jean-Pierre Jeunet film Amélie was released in 2001. The director of The Fifth Element was Luc Besson. His new film is called Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets, based on the French sci-fi comic book series Valerian and Laureline, created by Pierre Christin and Jean-Claude Mézières. The film comes out next month. That was August 2017 if you're listening from the future or the past somehow. Julian Casablancas was credited as writing all the songs on the first 3 Strokes albums, except for 3 songs on the album First Impressions of Earth, which were co-written with other band members. He said that he writes on both the piano and the guitar. Fabrizio Moretti, the drummer of the Strokes, was in a relationship with Drew Barrymore, but they were never married. Thanks for listening for another week. As usual, like and rate and subscribe to the podcast and share it with people if you think they'll like it. Chuck me an email at gimmeempathypodcast@gmail.com if you have some feedback. I'd love to hear from you. And I will speak to you again next week. Until then, stay hazy. Stay hazy. How about that Brisbane fog, huh? Hashtag Brisbane fog.